So we're here today to discuss some of the things that we've noticed in the labor market when we're trying to match job seekers with employers in Ethiopia. Some of the skills mismatches that we've noticed from the demand side, from companies, what they've been saying to us, what we've noticed, and from the supply side, like from job seekers that are coming in, and some of the gaps that we've noticed so far.
Thank you. My name is Olga Murabchinsky. Thank you to Nabil for inviting me to the panel. I work with MasterCard Foundation. We are a private foundation in Toronto, and we have a new strategy which focuses on the future of work. Our goal is to create 30 million jobs by 2030 in the region and in select markets. And to do this, we're going to be working in collaboration with the government and the private sector. And we see technology as central to the execution of our strategy. And to give you a sense, I think technology plays two roles when you think about the future of work. The first is as an enabler of job creation, and I think we'll hear a lot more of that today. We've seen a few really interesting models come up recently where technology has been used to link young people, especially on the continent, to global work opportunities. And I'll give you one example of a partner within our portfolio. It's called Samasource. It's a partner in Kenya that we're working with, which essentially contracts with large global firms that are doing digital work and takes the digital jobs and breaks them down into micro tasks. And they do something called impact sourcing, which is essentially bring some of the most disadvantaged youth into the system. They'll train them for 2 to 4 weeks on software development, on data entry, also on soft skills. And then what they'll allow these youth to do is to link into these platforms and start doing some of these micro jobs that they've contracted from these large global firms. Now, the interesting thing that we're seeing from this partnership is that these youth, after they've gone through the training and the work experience, they're transitioning into full-time employment. So this is an interesting model. We've only trained about 4,000 people in this way, but we see opportunity to really scale models like this up. The second thing that we think where technology can play a role is technology can also be a growth sector. And we've started looking at how other governments are doing this, and we spent a bit of time recently in China. And one thing that China has done is it's created a really tailored and focused plan to build out a technical workforce that not only gets jobs, but has long-term and meaningful careers. In 2017, the government of China introduced a national strategy for AI. And the goal of this strategy was to create a workforce by 2030, same as our timeline for foundation strategy, but by 2030 to create an industry worth $150 billion. And AI education is critical to this strategy. They're bringing some of the best experts in the world to train people in universities. They're integrating it into curriculum from primary school across basically the education system. They're introducing master's programs, but they're also doing a lot of work to ensure that these graduates have jobs. And they're investing billions into research and the development of new companies in AI, and they're partnering with some of the biggest tech firms in China, Alibaba, Tencent, and they're co-funding this massive initiative. Now, this plan seems to be working. Today, China accounts for over half of all new global projects around artificial intelligence, even though the country has only 5% of the global AI talent pool. Now, the government anticipates much more growth, and they expect this emerging pool of graduates that they're investing in now to build long-term and meaningful careers, because the AI industry globally is booming. So I think there's also an opportunity to think about, especially if you have 1.3 million people coming into the workforce every year, how to stimulate the growth of tech sector to create jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you very much, MCIT, for the invitation. I am Ondasan from Addis Ababa University, School of Information Sciences, and I'll be talking about the role of higher education in enabling the youth for employment, not only in the ICT sector, but also in other industries that are relevant for the national economy. So the idea is the industry needs a workforce that is, equipped with the technical skill they need, as well as the tools and the systems that are using. These days, almost all industries or companies are, doing their day-to-day activity using different kind of ICT systems. So professionals are required also to have ICT skill to be productive. And at the same time, the universities need all the graduates to be employed. After all, that's the whole objective. So we know that the industry and the university need to work hard. And communication is going to be very important to address this gap. The universities under the Ministry of Education are working for more than 80% employment of all graduates after 1 year of graduation. This is a strategy that's being, being implemented by the Ministry of Education for all government universities starting from last year. So to achieve this goal, the universities are having 7 strategies, but I'm going to mention only those that are relevant for our panel. One is university industry linkage. And this is very important because the university will not be in a position to produce a productive task force if they don't know what the industry is looking for. And the industries are not going to have the skill they need if they don't communicate the kind of skill they require from the universities or from the graduates. So one of the strategy is to have a university industry linkage, and we have at Addis Ababa University, we have a director working in that direction where different companies are coming to the university to understand the curriculum, at the same time to forward their comment what kind of skills that are required in those different sectors, so the graduates would be equipped. The other important strategy that we have, which is start working this year, is Career Service Center, where graduates before their graduation, they will have different kind of capacity building trainings like communication, time management, ICT skills, so that when they join the industry, they will be efficient in putting their effort to help the company to achieve the goal. The other one is we also are having a tracers study, because this is very important for the universities. Knowing where their graduates are is very important to actually change the curriculum, at the same time to introduce new kind of skills for the students. So tracer study is one of the other important strategy the university is implementing. And through this tracer study, through the university industry linkage, the universities will be in a position to understand what kind of ICT skills are required by the sectors, by the employing sectors, so that such kind of skills would be introduced. To be frank, most of the curriculums are closed in the academia. They are not actually, streamlined with the business. So the industry need to work very closely with the university, even to create a new curriculum, even for a short period of time, like for 5 years, a specific curriculum might be developed and graduates might be produced through that curriculum so that they can be helpful. But mind you, in the curriculum, there need to be ICT skills, because there are no industries that work without, this modern technology. So the engagement of graduates in the real life industries or projects is very important. So the companies or the employers need to come close to the university to really identify what the gap is in the curriculum, in our curriculum, so that the graduate will be competent in their business. I'll be talking more about that through the discussion.
Good morning. My name is Asma Maung Atanafu Mengisti. I'm the founder and CEO of Shola Corporation. It's found in US. And this business is successfully running for the last 10 years. And we trained coached or mentored and placed for high-paying jobs in the U.S. market. So what I would like to talk to you today is regarding what's the success behind our training program. As you all know, there are lots of immigrants coming to the U.S. and they are coming with different certificates or different background. And if they are not getting the right information or the right guidance, most of them are ended at low-paying jobs, even though they have a very good background, academic or technical background. So my company is taking care of these kind of people. Yeah. And when we see our program, we are focusing on providing 2 levels of training. First, we are making them capable of in IT in different levels. As you all know, in US, 2/3 of the companies require IT skills. It might be entry level or mid-level or high skill. So depending on the requirement or depending on the person's demand, we train different levels of IT training. And after the technical aspect of the training, we go to the second phase of the training, which is the soft skill or behavioral skill training, which most of our people are lacking. And this soft skill or technical skill is not only the communication, but also problem solving, how to work as a team, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the training, we are assisting them in placing for high-paying jobs. And right now, as I said, we trained and placed over 1,200, mostly Ethiopian immigrants in Washington, D.C. area. And right now, a couple of months back, I just came back to Ethiopia and trying to establish my own company and replicate the same model. So we know that we have very good graduates here. And these graduates are generalists. They have very good technical aspect, but they miss some soft skills that most companies, especially coming from other countries for outsourcing or having their own company in Ethiopia, they are complaining on the soft skill part of our graduates. So my plan is this company is going to have its own center here and providing those soft skills as well as technical skills that will equip them and more competitive in the job market. And also for those specialized training who are looking for high-paying jobs, we are designing our curriculum based on the demand. What's currently demanding in the market? For example, cybersecurity, big data, or cloud computing. These are the top or the hot job in the market. So we are focusing and changing our curriculum depending on the needs of the community or the business who are looking for our graduates. I'll talk more about later on the different sectors. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jelani Nelson. I'm a computer science faculty member at Harvard University. On top of teaching there, I also do research in theoretical computer science, specifically algorithms research. I'm here, I guess I was invited to this panel because of other stuff I do. So something else I do is I founded a program in 2011 called Addis Coder. You can check it out. It's addiscoder.com. It's a high school outreach program here in Ethiopia, teaching introductory programming and then algorithms to high school students. So we ran it in 2011. It was pretty low-key. Students just signed up by emailing me. We had it at Amiskilo. They let us use their facilities. But I noticed, that we were only getting students from Addis that summer, and even though it was a free course, private school students were the ones, by and large, taking advantage of it. They were very good. Many of them went off to MIT, Harvard, Princeton. Many stayed here as well. We have one in the audience who's now doing his PhD in computer science at USC. But I wanted to make sure we reached kind of all Ethiopian high schoolers and not just majority private school kids. So the next time I offered it, which was 2016, I partnered with a local foundation, the Mela Zenawi Foundation, who provided a lot of support for the program locally, including working with the Ministry of Education to select top government school students from across every region of Ethiopia. So in 2016, we had 82 students from all regions of Ethiopia come to Addis. We held it at the Ethiopian Youth Sports Academy. The students, by and large, were not from Addis. They stayed in dorms there. They were given cafeteria food. It was arranged by the Mothers Foundation. I was responsible for the curriculum and assembling the teaching staff. We brought in a teaching staff of 3 lecturers and 11 TAs. So me, another professor from Harvard, came in, and Dr. Tanit Gabru, who at the time she was a PhD student at Stanford in computer science. Now she's finished. She's a postdoc at Microsoft Research. And I thought that was it was a very successful program. We have one student coming back as a teaching assistant this summer. He just finished his first year at MIT. His name is Yosef Enauga from Debre Marcos. But we had a large number of very talented students. I mean, the Ministry of Education basically handed us, these are the top students according to some, according to GPA, et cetera, across the country. Here, teach them, and they were very strong. And we're doing it again this summer. We're going to have 239 students, not just 82. By the way, I think we have a few slots available. We're not at capacity, so if there are any high schoolers, I see cameras. I don't know if people will see this on television. Email addiscoder2018@gmail.com and include a picture of your transcripts and a short essay on why you want to be in the program. Okay, and we'll take a look at that. The program will start in 2 weeks for the high school students. So what do we teach them? We teach them, as I said, introductory programming and algorithms, and really it's about computational thinking and exposure. Because when we taught the class in 2016, we realized a lot of the students, especially the ones not from Addis, they didn't know what computer science was. Some of them hadn't even used a computer. They didn't even know what it meant to double click. And here we are trying to teach them algorithms. So it's about exposure and getting them excited about computer science, and also helping them to realize that there is job opportunity. So you see entrepreneurship and jobs here. But there is job opportunity in computer science in Ethiopia. So 2016, we had a career day. We brought in people from startups. We brought in people from government. We had the head of INSA there. We had people from MOST. We had people from academia. Do a panel and also give lectures to the students on this is what computer science is about. These are job opportunities available in Ethiopia. We're again going to have a career day this summer. We're bringing people from incubators, we're bringing people from X-Hub, from Gabea. I think we also might get someone from ICE Addis. We're also bringing other people in from government, from other companies. Again, so that the students are linked to the opportunity that's available, although our course itself, our syllabus is very academic. We're teaching foundational computer science thinking, not necessarily linked to specific technologies. One other thing we're doing different this summer, one thing we're trying out is, based on some readings we did, we saw that it was very effective to have young role models inspire students. So starting a week from today, we're going to bring in at least 40 local university students from different areas of Ethiopia. They're going to come and receive week-long training from our teaching staff. These are students who want to launch their own K-12 outreach initiatives in different areas of Ethiopia. So the idea is, we're just here for the summer teaching these 239 students, but then those 40 college students will then launch their own outreach programs and amplify the message and help evangelize computer science. Okay, so increase the exposure. So we're providing training to kind of help them launch their own initiatives, and those college students will stay on for the rest of the summer, for the rest of the program, to familiarize themselves with the syllabus and also help serve as lab assistants. I guess last thing I'll say, one other thing too is we also recognize the importance of having all people in the population, be a part of this. So last time we offered this program, over 45% of our students in the program were women. One is the third software engineer ever hired at Dropbox. He was, he was the head of server engineering there, responsible for scaling up Dropbox from its beginning to tens of millions of users. We have another early Dropbox engineer. We have someone from Google. Yosef Enauga, who just finished his first year at MIT from Debre Marcos, is going to also be here as a teaching assistant. So we have a very, very talented teaching staff, which I hope will also help inspire the students. And we also provide informal mentoring after the program is over. A lot of these students add me on Facebook or add other teaching staff members on Facebook and ask us lots of questions as they navigate their careers. And I think that informal mentoring has also been valuable to the students. I'll hand it off.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to just kick off with a few questions, and I'd like to start with, I'd like to start with the demand and where these jobs are going to come from. And maybe, Mehret, you could tell us a little bit from your company's experience where you're seeing demand for jobs for young people, what sectors you're seeing those demand coming from, and particularly those that, and particularly around the skills. You've talked about the need, the fact that you have a window into kind of what the skills companies are demanding, and maybe the mismatch between what some of the students and graduates coming out are faced with. So I'd like to understand which sectors are primarily demanding jobs, and particularly those with looking for ICT skills.
The manufacturing companies have been the ones that have been coming in with a high amount of demand. Next to that has been construction, which has been slowing down recently, and then also the service sector, I would say. And in terms of the gaps that employers have been noticing and that we've been getting feedbacks from, are like even though, as you've mentioned and you've also mentioned, a lot of graduates come out with a lot of the good technical skills. There's a gap in the ICT and the soft skills. So they would come in, and nowadays companies are growing. Ethiopia is growing, and a lot of companies are adopting technology, and they're becoming systematic in their way of doing business. And so accordingly, they would require talent that would also respond to those needs. And so what unfortunately we've been noticing is that while they do have good technical skills, and let's say for instance accounting, their ability to adapt to new technology has been relatively lagging behind. And also in regards to soft skills, I would say like time management skills and communication skills, problem solving skills have also been some of the gaps that we've been noticing. So the gaps have been like with ICT skills, their ability to adapt to new technology very quickly. ICT in the past used to be very specific to certain fields like computer science or computer engineering, but right now like almost any company that is requesting for any kind of talent would also require ICT skills in their talents as basic as literacy and numeracy skills these days. So that and soft skills is, I would say, where the gaps have been.
Okay, thank you. And I think that, and I think that's an interesting trend. I mean, we've seen over the last 10, 20 years, companies have increasingly put emphasis on soft skills over technical skills. Well, technical skills need to change all the time, but soft skills are constant. And I think we're seeing an emergence, certainly in the manufacturing sectors that we work in, of also now ICT skills just being a basic across everything. And certainly we also see a trend of automation as well. And automation could be one of those things that could actually cost jobs as well, right? It could be a threat if you don't skill up, if you don't learn how to interact with machines, how to program them, how to service them, or robots in manufacturing's case. So it's an opportunity and it's also a threat in that case. And are you seeing, in terms of, you're saying this increased ICT skill, how fast are you seeing this change occurring in Ethiopian companies? Because we think of this as maybe something that you would see in China or in Europe, but what about in Ethiopia? Are we seeing a fast change in this regard?
Yeah, I would say that that's an obvious one. I mean, we were established in 2015, but in the past few years, we've seen a dramatic increase in requests for these skills. So, like, let's say when we initially started, a lot of companies may not have adopted ERP systems in their companies, but nowadays, more and more of our clients are adopting ERP systems, and so they would need candidates that would really adopt with that new technology very quickly and rapidly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I've been visiting factories around the country and seeing them increasingly not being, just simple manual machines. And we've seen factories in maybe 10, 15 years ago, you'd see manual machines, manual sewing machines. Then it became electrical. And now it becomes, a sewing machine with a tablet on it. And you're seeing these operators programming these machines. Let's talk about some of the ICT sectors. Dr. Olga, you talked about AI in China. And I think China is a really interesting example of a country that has created a lot of wealth for young people by by upskilling them in terms of ICT, where they can become much more productive than if they didn't have those skills, but doing similar functions, perhaps. Could you tell us about some of the real growth sectors that we've seen in other countries?
So maybe so I actually brought my phone here to give you another example. So I think when we think of ICT, we often think of STEM, we think of coders, we think of programmers. But then if we think about the whole value chain around even a technology like this, so take my iPhone, okay? There's 34 components that make up this device. The glass display comes from the US. My battery is from South Korea. I think one of the processors is from Japan. The camera is also from Japan. The software is developed in the US mainly, but if you look at all the millions of apps that are on this phone, I mean, this is an ecosystem of jobs that really extends nations, it extends industries. So when we think of ICT, I mean, where we can play, it's very broad. So, one thing that I've seen, I think the Chinese did very well when they came up with this AI strategy before, is kind of the early conversations. They were thinking about kind of what assets do they have as a country, and where is it that they can play, where is it that they have a competitive advantage globally. So I was trying to think about this last night. I mean, even in terms of Ethiopia, I mean, you guys have daily flights on Ethiopian Airlines. You have a really booming industry. So when you think about options in terms of how to play in the tech sector, maybe it could be beyond software. Maybe there's kind of really an opportunity to link into some of these emerging, really emerging kind of global value chains around technology. And I gave you an example of one device, but there are many, many more of these. So it could be an interesting opportunity to think through how to link into those to create jobs.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. There's a massive ecosystem around traditional industries like agriculture, like industry, where there are new opportunities created by technology. So for example, in agriculture, when we look at, most farmers in Ethiopia have animals, but they don't have vets because the vets are too far away. But increasingly, how many of us now, when we have a health issue, go online and quickly look it up and see what we need? Why can't farmers access e-veterinary services, for example? Can we not reach people in that way? So we need to think about ecosystems for agriculture, for industry, for the services sector, and what those opportunities are to access those markets. I agree. Okay, let's come on to the skills side now. I'd like to understand a bit better what our educational sector is seeing in terms of ICT skills. So this is an open question. What are some of the jobs that people with ICT skills are going into within the ICT sector and outside, and how is that changing?
Okay, thank you. I think we need to see the two sectors different, because for those who are joining the ICT industry, the skills are a little bit technical. They are more into programming, ERP system development, networking, cloud computing. It would be a little bit high-tech. But if you see for other industries, the skills that are required some of them are very basic. Even using Microsoft Office would be a challenge for people in the industry, but they need to do that a lot. And getting used to the different parts of a computer, like how to use, like double click, how to copy and paste, how to drag. These are very, trivial skills from the ICT sector, but when you see it in other industries, it would be really, important for people to do the, to get the job done. So from the ICT industry, we have an experience like from different companies. They come to the university. I've been working as an associate dean for natural science, natural and computational science college, and we received many requests from Ethiopian Airlines, from banks, and different IT-based companies to employ our graduates. But their skill is not streamlined to their need, because whenever they go to the companies, they need to know what kind of system, exists so that they can directly move into production. So the training for such kind of sectors need to be demand driven. Instead of, we now are having generalists when it comes to ICT usage. What we develop or the curriculum that we develop would produce generalists rather than for specific industries. So if it is for different sectors or industries, then the training has to be demand-driven, where we understand what the agriculture sector needs so that we can include it in our business, in our curriculum. Look into the financial industry so that we can include it in our curriculum. We provide basic ICT training for all students in the university, but that is a very high-level training which cannot be put into work. So the training has to be demand-driven when it comes to different sectors.
I want to add something regarding this one. I have been working with different banks here before I left to the US. And right now I heard that so many banks are automated. They have different services. And they are investing millions of dollars on this investment. However, their clients or their customers, they are digital illiterate. So for these industries, just as an example, the banking or the financing industry, they are the one who are also providing training or digital literacy or computer literacy to their customers. The same thing to government offices. And there are different online markets. And when we see the end users, they are illiterates in the technology. So the training has to focus on in different levels. Who is my customer or who is my client? So when we are investing on the technology, we have to make sure that the end user is capable of using that technology. Otherwise, it's a waste. And there should be different levels of training. Entry-level training, as I said, for example, computer literacy, how they turn on the computer, how they manipulate, how they do search on the internet and so on. And also, if they need someone who is going to support on their technology, they have to have a training center that's capable of studying or analyzing the job market and producing capable young professionals that can support their products or their services. Thank you.
I'll add something also to what one person said, which is related to training generalists. So, I very much, I agree. It's the same, say, at Harvard, and I was an undergrad at MIT, and other places I've spent time at. I mean, computer science departments there generally train generalists, and I agree and think that's the right approach. And the point is, technology just changes so fast that if you have someone coming in for a bachelor's degree and you teach them toward one very specific technology, that might become obsolete in a couple of years, right? So what you want to make sure is you teach them the foundations that they can then use to pick up technologies as they become relevant. When I was an undergrad, the MIT only taught me one programming language, and that was MIT Scheme, which was totally useless outside of the classroom. I mean, there are people who actually use Scheme, so let me not say that in case someone's listening. I did have a class that I had to do assignments in Java in, but the class didn't teach me Java. They thought, okay, you know the basics of computer science. Go teach yourself Java. It's on the web, and then you can do our assignments. So it was all about the fundamentals and not tailored to specific technologies, and I do think that's important.
Okay, thank you. Now I want to open this conversation up for the audience. Do we have somebody who can run with the mic? Thank you. I'll just point to ask. Okay, so can we take questions from the audience? Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. My name is Munir Turi. I'm the CEO of KFIA. I have two questions, one for Dr. Wandessan and one for Dr. Olga. For Dr. Wandessan, you have mentioned an industry-academia linkage, but in practical terms, how is that going to work, especially when it comes to ICT? there is the question of intellectual property, IP. So how does an industry linkage with academia work within the context of intellectual property and from a practical market engagement perspective? For Dr. Olga, I think you have mentioned two interesting engagements or initiatives, one from Alibaba and from Tennessee as an example, but we don't see those kind of examples in developing nations, especially in Africa. So how does that translate when we contextualize such, whether it's an AI strategy or whether it is other different strategies within the context of the African continent, and where employment is key as opposed to just entrepreneurship? 1.3 million people, you need an industry that uptakes to scale. So how can we contextualize that? Thank you.
My name is Fisahation Mengistu. I'm a professor as well as a consultant. I'm not an IT expert, but I did my doctorate degrees 30 years ago on international transfer of technology. I have certain problems related to IT. There is confusion and misunderstanding about the role of IT or ICT in development. Not only in development, but in the various sectors of the economy. So the question I want to ask you is, does Ethiopia, the current socio-economic conditions of this country, to what extent do you think it's more or less high level so that it can promote sustainable development in the country? The second question I have is as follows. There is a confusion that ICT equals to technology. I differ with that. ICT is not technology at all. It is part, a minor part of it. The question I want to ask you is, if we continue to computerize automatization of, for example, the banking industry, the various sectors of the economy, agriculture, manufacturing, and many others, aren't we also creating displacement of labor? Take, for example, Heineken. I have had an opportunity to visit the factory, and it's fundamentally or mainly automatized. So at a macroeconomic level, if we continue to automatize a lot of our industries and companies, aren't we displacing labor in a country where there is massive unemployment? So how do you strike a balance between, on one hand, generating employment, on the other hand, modernization through automatization? The other issue I want to ask you is, I honestly feel this country is being driven by slogans. Example, transform, transform. What exactly does transform mean? I mean, do we have a good understanding about transformation of a society or a government or institutions for that matter? I hear about entrepreneurship as well. I have seen and heard many people, young graduates, talking about entrepreneurship without having any good idea about the concept and definition of entrepreneurship, and whether entrepreneurship can be acquired or whether it is born with a person, like leadership, for example. So I want to appeal to all of you, really, to be more modest about, I mean, Ethiopia is not United Kingdom or the United States, or even China, or even India for that matter. I think we need to be more sober about our capacity. We are at a very low level of development. I have an opportunity to teach at 7 universities in this country. The level of education is low. The level of technological capacity is low. The fact that we are assembling cars or mobile phones, we think we are technologically advanced. It's not true. What I see is not industrialization, but what what I would call prefabricated industrialization. You have a warehouse, you bring machines and produce textile and leather. So I would very much like to appeal to my Ethiopian colleagues and scholars to think more seriously about the role of IT and socio-economic impact. I'm not saying IT is not important. It is absolutely crucial. But at what level? At what sector? And the type and the quality of ICT. I have seen, for example, the Ethiopian Revenue Customs Authority, for example. People are talking about computerization. I lived in Europe for many years of my life. More than 30 years ago, there were six banks around 400 meters from my place where I was residing. After 30 years, there is no bank at all. Everything has been computerized. So I wanted to say, I mean, we are not like in comparable situation as Korea or China for that matter. We need to adapt technology compatible to our level of development. Thank you so much.
Take one more question for the first round, and then we'll have a second round.
Okay, thank you very much. My question is to Dr. Wondersen and Dr. Olga. You mentioned the Chinese national strategy on AI. I think you said that they have tried to integrate it from the lower grades to the universities. Dr. Wondersen also mentioned what they have done at the university level, but do you think there is always a need for to have say type of national strategy as compared to institutional strategy? For example, in the Addis Ababa University case, they have a strategy for revising the curriculum to linking it to the industry and these things, but there is no direct linkage with the lower grades. So, what do you think about this issue? Do we need to have say type of strategies, or what are the advantages to have such national strategy and integrate into the university level as well as to the lower level? Thank you.
Let's take one more question for this round. I can see your hand is up. Okay. All right, let's take a first round of responses from the panel. Let's go in the same order, and you're okay?
So, Munir, maybe let me start with your question. Of course, you know, AI might not be the strategy for Ethiopia, although I have to say I visited ICOG Labs last week, and I was so impressed with the level of talent, and I know Sophia made it here, and I'm looking forward to seeing her, but there is some capacity here. I'm not saying that's the right strategy, but then what is? So if you look at the growing, from what we've seen, I'll tell you what we've seen maybe on the region, maybe that might be a bit more applicable, but one of the biggest employers in sub-Saharan Africa are MNOs. There's about 4 million jobs that have been created, and it contributes about $13 billion to taxation every year. So there's, I think in terms of, especially in Ethiopia with the recent liberalization of the technology sector, I know a lot more is yet to be revealed on how this will unveil. I'm sure there'll be new and interesting opportunities for innovation and job creation. But there's another one, and that's e-commerce. One of the only unicorns in Africa, that's a company worth over $1 billion, is Africa Internet Group, which you guys might have heard of. It's Jumia, which is an e-commerce platform which was born in Nigeria but has since scaled. Now this model is really interesting because it's not just the creation of tech jobs, but it allows people to be linked to markets. So when it works well, for example, in some of the global examples, what it will do is link merchants selling goods to a whole community of buyers, both locally and internationally. So that's another really interesting and emerging opportunity for an ecosystem of jobs to develop. There was also another question about AI strategy and whether there needs to be a linkage to something bigger. I think in the case of China, it really worked because you had resources mobilized. You had money, you had investment mobilized towards this particular technology sector. You had educational institutions at all levels reorienting themselves to teach in a complementary way. So they learned the basics, maybe very, very basics of computing, maybe at elementary level, and then the higher they went, the more sophisticated the AI training got. I don't know what that looks like, but maybe our colleague from Harvard can tell us more. But the point is, it was an integrated strategy with a very, and what the result is also they're providing labor, not only to meet the demand locally, but they're providing labor to meet the global demand, which is increasing a lot. So for looking into the future, this is a great growth strategy for that particular market.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'll reflect on 4 important points. The first one is on intellectual property in relation to university-industry linkage. I've talked only about one phase of UIL here. When we, at the university level, university-industry linkage has 2 phases. One is in research and innovation, where the concept of intellectual property will come into the table. The other one is for teaching learning, because we have witnessed that many companies are complaining graduates are not competent enough to directly go into the work that they are assigned to. And as we have heard, companies have been retraining the graduates to fit into their model. So what I've discussed about, or what I've talked about, is university industry linkage in this side of teaching learning, not in research and innovation. In research innovation, it has its own modality. The companies that are engaged in research and innovation will have memorandum of understanding with the university where such kind of issues can be covered. But for teaching learning, we know that the role of the university is to introduce the youth into the profession, then to train them in that area. But when it comes to engaging them into the work, then we need collaboration from the industry. And we see that from a point of internship, where students will go to different industries before they graduate so that they can get used to the work environment and the skills that they are required. Then after graduation, they are not going to have any difficulty to fit into the business. So my main concern was on teaching learning rather than on research and innovation. The other point is from Dr. Abiot regarding the integration. Education here in Ethiopia is one of the challenges that we have, because it's a kind of a chain. It starts from KG and goes to the university and higher level. So we need to have a very extensive reform on the education sector to really address this part. At a university level, we are not in a position to change the methods, the learning or the teaching method at a lower level. But the issue is, what can we do after we receive the students from, after they complete grade 12? So that's what we are working on. But at least at a university level, Ministry of Education is, engaging all universities to work in such kind of, harmony, so that graduates can fit into the business. But it needs really a good integration with lower level educational system to really get qualified graduates. The other one, when it comes to women in ICT, I have only one example. At the university level, we have scholarship for female for graduate program. And also, the university, starting from last year, have been employing female graduates as a graduate assistant to increase the engagement of women, which include also the ICT. So I think we can say, we have some role. The other one for the second question, technology for Ethiopia. The idea is technology can help us to leapfrog some of the challenges that we have, because most of the thing that we have in technology is a soft skill. And soft skill can be easily injected into the youth so that they can make use of it. We know that we're not trying to develop high-tech devices. We're not trying to be innovative at that level. But when it comes to service, when it comes to software, ERPs, when it comes to social media and such kind of engagement, we know that we have the capacity. We know that our students are very capable of injecting or being part of these to influence even internationally. We know that we have so many Ethiopians working at international level, at Google, at MIT, at Harvard, who are contributing even for Sophia. We have some programmers working on. So this is the kind of thing that we want to create on the soft skill part, if not on the innovation and devices.
I want to add on the importance of IT in the country. Actually, it's not a question of, or it's not an option to me. It is mandatory to jump and follow the others. Western countries, they invest lots of financial and human resources. Yeah, so we are lucky enough that we are capturing whatever they developed. Okay, they invest lots of money for example, producing the first computer and improving the technology to where it's we are founding right now. Look at the phone and so on. And also look at the services. For example, look at Kafia, which we are using right now in Ethiopia. How the technology is making it easy. But we have to make sure that do we have enough entrepreneurs in the technology? Okay. One of the points in this discussion is how we can empower the youth to be entrepreneurs so that they can be not only followers or employable to technology, but also have their own company in entrepreneurship or producing some technology, part of the technology, part of the world. So one thing is just training. The training has to be, first that's technical training, soft skill training, and also we have to focus on the training related to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship requires management skill, negotiation skill, marketing, and problem solving, and taking risk. Our technologists have to get all these trainings so that they can be capable of running their own technology company. Thank you.
So there are a few things I wanted to respond to brought up by Professor Fasaha. Some of the things you brought up really resonated with me and are things that I've thought about kind of leading up to this summer. One of them was about job displacement. And I think that's not only an issue in Ethiopia, that's an issue even in the United States. You have companies like Uber who they want to have automated self-driving cars. It's going to displace the 1 million+ truck drivers that we have in the United States. So I mean that's something that's I think impacting countries all around the world. I don't have the answer to that one as to what I think the government needs to somehow develop good policy around that, and I don't know what the answer is. That's not my area of expertise. One thing that I have thought about a little bit more that you brought up was you challenged us, I guess, as academics to really think more about about development and socioeconomic implications of whatever outreach we do. And that is something that I've spent a little time about thinking, just because when I first taught Addis Coder in 2011, I just finished grad school, and for me it was just, I'm going to go to Ethiopia to visit some relatives, let me do something on the side for fun and help some kids out, so I taught the class. But then starting 2016, when it started being co-sponsored by the Medalist Foundation and the Ministry of Education was involved, and this summer the Ministry of Science and Technology is letting us use one of their university campuses, I realized, wait, this is becoming a bigger thing, and I started brainstorming, like, what more can we do to really have impact, and like, what's the kind of impact we should be trying to have. And I realized, these are, I think, questions that are really the kinds of questions that people in like policy making think about in economics, which is not my training. I'm a theoretical computer scientist that lives in an ivory tower, right? So I did try to reach out to other people at Harvard, because that's where I am in the School of Education. I myself started searching for things online and started just doing reading. Like there's this, at least in the US, there's this, I think, Presidential Committee for the Advancement of Science and Technology that was assembled by Obama when he was in office. And they produced several documents to give to the president with policy recommendations regarding STEM education, especially K through 12 outreach. So, I mean, I read a couple of those documents, and so did someone from the Millis Foundation, and we started chatting about them. And I mean, and actually reading those documents and chatting that was, I think, one of the reasons we decided to have this training of 40 or so local university students across Ethiopia who want to run their own K through 12 outreach after the summer, because there was this one of the white papers that was delivered to Obama. It was called "Prepare and Inspire for K through 12 STEM Outreach," and it was talking about the importance of having young peer role models for high schoolers to really get involved in STEM. But this is just I do this. This is like my side hobby. I have a day job, which is professoring, and I do this just for fun. And I'm, every summer that we do this, we try to brainstorm about more ways we can do it better and have more impact. And I think it would be a really great thing for us sitting in the ivory tower doing theory research to talk to people in policy, in economics, who really understand that space better, to brainstorm with us about how we can have more impact. I did mention, I mean, we are trying to get out a little of the ivory tower this summer with the program in having this career day and having speakers coming in from incubators and from industry. I mentioned some of the companies. Also, someone from EthioJobs is planning to come in as well and talk to the students about job opportunities and fairs that they have. But I definitely agree with what you said, that we need to talk to policymakers.
Thank you. Maybe one further reaction from my side. I think on this question of displacement, there's always displacement of jobs. If we look at the jobs we're doing today, they're different to the jobs we were doing, every one of us in this room, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We are constantly having to learn new skills and do our jobs in a different way. I think where technology comes in, it's making the pace of that change a lot faster. And there will always be displacement from something to something else. And of course, with technology and with machines, it will mean the machines will do more for us, right? But in order not to become extinct, we have to be learning a lot faster. And we no longer live in an age where we go to school and then we apply what we learned in school in a job. We're constantly having to learn. New tricks. And the educational sector is having to react to that and to say, how do I serve people who are in jobs, not just night school, not just 3-year undergraduate programs, but how do we support industry on an ongoing basis through a whole cycle where training is just one part of that cycle, but R&D is another part of it, and so on. So I think we have to embrace technology. We have to recognize that it will create displacement, and we have to say, well, what is it going? What are the new opportunities going to be? And I think China has been a real leading light in that, in understanding how a worker on a production line can produce, instead of making 10 garments in an hour, with a new machine they can make 100 garments in an hour, and they can get paid more for that. It was no different when electricity was invented and all of a sudden we needed less to do more. So it can be a wealth creator. But I agree, overall, in terms of numbers of jobs, it's going to result in fewer people doing more work. But we as a country then have to recognize and say, how do we ensure that all our people are skilled in the right way to be able to do that? And on gender, I want to just make one comment, because I think that's a topic that really deserves a lot of attention. I think there are a lot of a lot of marginalized groups in society that may not benefit from the ICT revolution as much as others, girls being one of them, poorer people. You mentioned that, you know, it was essentially private school children. You know, so who are learning coding? Who are learning ICT skills? Is it the poorest or is it the richest? You know, who are getting access to those opportunities? Is it the urban people or is it the most rural people? And I think we need to be as deliberate as possible in making sure that there is digital equality and that there is opportunity for the most marginalized groups to be able to access these skills and opportunities. Okay, let's take a few more questions. Where's our microphone? Yeah, could you go to that?
Hi, my name is Peter Frickman. I'm an entrepreneur and advisor. The topic of soft skills has come up a lot, and the importance of soft skills, especially for people entering the workforce, the training. What are some programs and tactics that you've seen work in the Ethiopian context to train soft skills?
Thank you, Nabil. Mine is more of a recommendation, especially for Dr. Wendeson and Ato Asmama. I had an opportunity to go to Cairo on an ICT-related business, and one of the things I asked about is how they position the graduates when they when they become workforce, when they join the industries. And one of the things, one of the CEOs of one of the companies took me to a place where this is a private company which trains soft skills to the graduates during the summer break. For example, 3 months, they learn about communication skills, email communications, presentations, negotiations, all sorts of stuff. These guys are trained at least for 2 months, at least 2 months, every year throughout their studies. And by the time they graduate, they are very much equipped with all the skills. So today's theme is like the discussion point is skill gaps. And I know that most of you here in the panel agreed that there is a skill gap in Ethiopia. And one of the best things to do is not to do it within the university, but the university working with the private sector to provide those trainings to the graduates every year, very tailored trainings or programs, so that when they graduate, they are confident enough to really go into the industries. That's why one of the things, and I would like you to discuss that and work on that. Thank you.
Can you just pass the mic to Olaf behind you?
My name is Olaf Ertz. I'm from Save the Children, implementing a youth program where we're particularly focusing on soft skills development. I came to Ethiopia in 1994, and I think Ethiopia has developed over the last 23 years tremendously in regard to development. But what it has not developed is in regard to personal relationships. You know, like what I always call like to build a mafia. And the mafia building in Ethiopia has declined. The grandfathers and grandmothers are now crying because the kids don't take care anymore, because maybe of technology. But one thing is also like, we're talking so much about higher education, you know, like the best students will, I mean, even the Prime Minister says like, the best students will go. But how many best students do we have? We have 300,000 graduates per year from university, TVET, and also like teacher training college. We have 2 million dropouts out of the education system every year. You are all talking about creating hulls, yeah? Software applications and so on and so forth. Go on Google, Mr. and Mrs. Google, and you ask, yeah, Bello, how is the connectivity there today? What answer you get? Nothing. Because we are not talking about relevant content creation. I worked in the ICT sector for 9 years. ICT 4D, eh? ICT for development. ICT for development only works if there's ICT for me. If there's no for me, then there's no 4D. And we worked in using ICT in order to improve products and services in agriculture, education, and health. So, where are now the agriculture specialists? Where can we use ICT, what we did in Zambia, for the certification of organic produce for export? How can we actually develop systems that the trucks are driving fully loaded in both directions? Ethiopia is one of the richest countries in the world. People will not believe it, but it is like this. Because if trucks can go one way empty, that means you have a lot of money. I'm coming from Germany. We can't afford this. You know? And Germany is not really a rich country, isn't it? We're only the second in the world, I think, in regard also to export. So sometimes we have to be, and going back really to our fundamentals. The other thing is about education. When I was young and beautiful, and you can imagine that was many years ago, I was invited by the university in 1997, now I even put the number. They said, like, how can we make education more relevant for the labor market? 21 years ago. Now we are still talking about the same thing. And what I said at that time already, before you enter to university, you have to enter into the labor market for 2 or 3 months. That you know when you are a mechanical engineer, that this is a bolt. You know, I heard a really nice story from an architect. He hired civil engineers, okay, 2 graduates.
Olaf, I'm not
No, let me finish that one, please.
I want to ask you, I'm not sure what your question is, so please.
No, it's not questions, it's all like thinkings, you know, like where we are talking about so high level without really understanding what's happening on the ground. We are talking about ICT applications, and who of us has 24-hour service to internet connections? Who has services that they are paid for? You know, we're talking about high-level things, but not getting the basics right. We are talking about not electricity supply 24 hours. You know, everyone says like, oh, electricity is gone. So what are you doing? Nothing. You know, like, so the thing is like, when we want to talk about entrepreneurship, skills gaps, and all these different things on development, we have really to think about the basics to get that one right. Yeah, and coming back, now I lost my thread. Thank you, Nabil. I'm done now here. If you want to talk to me, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you, Olaf. We had a question here, and then we'll go to Mahder at the back. Here, Swa. Yep, no.
Sure. My name is Masra Warner. I'm the founder and managing director of Ict Investment. It's an accelerator and investment advisory firm helping Ethiopian businesses access to finance and capacity development. My question is that there is a lot of complaints I get from businesses that there are no skilled professionals in the country. In fact, there is an example. I trained someone and we did really well. Diageo stole it, doubled his salary, I guess, which is a good thing. And then within a year, he went to Unilever, again, doubled. So that just is emblematic of how skilled labor is so short in the country. At the same time, we know that there is a huge unemployment in the country. So how do we bridge that gap? The second question that's really related to this is, I've heard a new initiative, Nabil might know about it, the Young Professionals Development Program that's implemented by the Ethiopian Investment Commission that takes fresh graduates from the university and gives them skills development. It is kind of internship. They put them through different departments for a certain amount of months or time, and then they would go to permanent employment. How do we scale that up? Not just within government, but within the private sector so that we do get these skilled professionals that are demanded in the country. Thanks.
Sure. We had Mahdir at the back.
Good morning. Thank you, the panel, for your remarks. I have two questions and one concern. My first question is, in the panel, it keeps on coming that the skill gap and the training is for more on the students and the graduates, but rather than the companies themselves. Last year, we did some random indicative research, and in the construction industry where I'm coming from, more than 75% of the companies, they don't have a proper email account. So how are these disturbers, like Nabil said, these energetic and some of them are very good students, will have a platform to work on in these archaic companies where they don't even have a proper email account. So that is how are you, or how is the system or whoever is out there planning to address this very big disconnect between the industry and the future. The second one. They don't have a what account? Pardon? They don't have a what account? You said they don't have a something account? Email. Email. Like at gmail.com? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And in the other one is on the industry and education linkage. Like last year, not the one that graduated this weekend, but last year, close to 20,000 engineers were graduated. But we also did some CSR activity a couple of months ago, and the students that are coming they are working as waitresses, and they are working as parking attendants. They are working in different areas because they couldn't find the job that they are trained for. That's a big loss for the country. A lot of millions are being lost for the country in monetary terms, assuming that people will react when we talk about money rather than the skills that we are losing. So my question is, how this goes directly to the AAU. I really wonder if our universities know their alumni properly. Even the Ministry of Education knows the number of graduates that we know, so we track them. So down in the line, 1 year, 2 years, we might change curriculums, or also we might close some departments and open some departments. So I really wonder how this linkage will work to the industry in the future. My last concern is that word entrepreneurship. I like the word, at the same time I'm a little bit cautious because Ethiopia soon, if everything goes well, will go to the World Trade Organization. And if privatization comes as being discussed, we'll open up markets for international conglomerates and other highly organized and efficient companies. But now the trend from my experience is there are lots of me and my company. I created this. I don't want to be employed. These kind of things are mushrooming left and right. So it will take our rightful, that is my fear, our rightful competitive advantage in the global, also in the regional market. So where are our big companies? Where are our companies that will somehow protect the interest of the whole society? That is my concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll go to the last round now of reflections from the panel. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. Maybe there was a point on soft skills.
Just a few points to address some of the things that you've said, and also what you've said, Ms. Rak. In terms of the infrastructures not being in place, that's very evident. That's a problem that we're all going to continue to face. But I feel like it's really great that we're all here having to start to have this dialogue and starting to talk about it now rather than 10 years later when it's going to be too late for us. Because, you know, the youth, like you've mentioned, there's 1.3 million people getting into the labor market every year. Over 50% of our population is youth. And so if we don't work today to equip them with the right skills, then we may be lagging behind, even though there aren't the right infrastructures in place. In regards to what you've mentioned, Ms. Rak, in terms of the disconnect between the labor market, supply and demand, we've also noticed that, and that is something that we deal with on a regular basis. You know, from the supply side, like I've mentioned earlier, they come in with the technical skills, but in terms of their ability to adapt to a technology like basic Microsoft Office and, you know, presenting PowerPoint, you know, preparing good PowerPoint presentations and like manipulating data in Excel can be a bit of a daunting task for a lot of candidates. And so like what can be done? What can be done to provide solutions for this? Some of the things that have been mentioned in the white paper come to mind. Like, so there is no one right answer or one right approach, in my opinion. There has to be a whole host of different factors that need to come in together. So one of the things that you've also mentioned, Wendasen, is the linkage and the industry demand-based training. So the training and education institutions, I feel like, need to be a little bit more tuned in to the businesses and the companies and what their needs are. Although, like you said, that there also needs to be some, upgrading from the businesses side. And in addition to the business demand-driven training, the soft skills training, like we keep mentioning that, there are some great work that have been done that, like the gentleman mentioned, but I feel like not enough. There needs to be a nationwide policy reform when it comes to soft skills, or what I'd like to call life skills training, because like the name can be misleading a lot of times. I mean, as we all may have heard the old adage, hired for aptitude, but fired for the wrong attitude, right? So teaching our youth today so that they can be globally competitive for tomorrow in these areas is very important. The other area that is also mentioned in the white paper is the partnership. Like you've also mentioned, the linkages between the educational institutions and the industry, but we need to open up the scope a little bit. I feel there needs to be different stakeholders that need to come in to ensure the success of these youth. So development company, organizations, private companies, governments, and educational institutions. And the last but not least, something that we deal with also on a very regular basis, is the post-training supports, or what we commonly refer to as the 3C supports. So the career counseling, career matching, and the career coaching. That's really lacking, I find, in our country. And for example, just to give you an example, writing proper CVs is a major issue. A lot of times they may have the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, but they don't have the know-how in terms of how to put that properly on a CV so that they can put their best foot forward. And also when you go to interviews, how do they present themselves on interviews? How early do they need to arrive? Some things that need to be very basic, but we find that are lacking. And when it comes to the career matching, it's a very daunting world out there once graduates, I've been there, I know it. Once you've graduated, you're looking for a job, you don't know where to go, who to talk to. So, having these linkages and assigning someone from the educational institutions to sort of ease the way for graduates to get into the labor market a little bit more smoother, having assigned a job matcher or a job developer who could connect them with the industry or the company that would match their skills and abilities. And the last bit that I would say is also having a career coach. So something that's not being practiced a lot in our country, but I feel there's a big need. A lot of people, once they're hired into a new job, the first 45 days tend to be a panic and panic mode. So, but if they have a career coach who they can continually check in with, or who can guide them through that complicated first 45 days process, then they would be set up to succeed much better. So these are some of the things that I would say would also be able to work in our country to bring us a little bit more success, I would say.
Great. So maybe a few reflections. The first, believe it or not, my first degree was in computer science, and I was so bad at it, in fact, that I got into development. But I remember when I was being taught, the people who were teaching me were not necessarily people with PhDs. There were people who were in industry. There were people who were working and really had a good insight into what was needed within the particular sector. So maybe, looking back now and reflecting a little bit, maybe the best way to link industry to education systems is to put industry in the classroom and really kind of allow for that linkage. And in fact, that's how I got my first job, was with somebody who realized how bad I was at the coding, but how good I was at the research, and pulled me into my first work opportunity. The other one, maybe Olaf, to some of your reflections. ICT, if we think about the ecosystem of jobs, not all jobs that emerge are technical or require these very robust technical skills. And Munir, I'm sure you know, building up Kafia, just with your company, there's people that sell airtime, for example, or, thinking about, technology, there's people that sell devices. I mean, there's a whole broader ecosystem that starts to emerge that really creates long-term and sustainable work opportunities. So I think if we keep our mind open to what is possible, I think there could be a lot there. And then finally, there's one other example that I wanted to mention, and I heard a few other reflections here. I don't think a country necessarily needs to be a global leader in a technical area to benefit from ICT as a growth sector. And I'm thinking now particularly about India. They have 5 million people employed in business process outsourcing. They have 55% of the global market on BPO. Why? I mean, why can't a country like Ethiopia start to compete there? What they did is they, over a number, probably 3 decades, they built the infrastructure, they developed these large IT parks where call center staff could be placed. They put English in the curriculum from a very young age so that a lot of these, people, and this isn't just call center jobs, it's data entry jobs. It's a whole ecosystem of jobs, and they did a lot to attract the big companies, global companies to come and set up and outsource some of these jobs. So there's other opportunities as well, I think, for countries to compete in this BPO market that could be real creators of job opportunities.
Okay, thank you. I would like to, touch upon some of the points, but I have to remind you that I'm here as Wendesan. I'm not representing the university, so it shouldn't be quoted as, the stand of the university for some of my comments. One of the things is experience from Kenya, where private companies are providing capacity building training. I thought I tried to mention that during my initial points. The university established Career Service Center, and in each college we are having career guide, an expert who's trained, who try to coach the graduates before they graduate on how to prepare CV, how to present themselves, how to improve their communication skill, and for such kind of things. It just started this year. We'll see the fruit maybe after a couple of years. When it comes to prioritizing, the areas, we know that infrastructure is a part that we are lacking a lot. But do we have the time to wait until the infrastructure is complete, or can we ask what can we do with the infrastructure that's already available? That's the kind of mentality we need to have, so that whatever we have, let's work on it and see if the infrastructure improves so that we can capitalize on that part. The other thing, when it comes to graduates or university youth, being engaged in the industry, one of the challenges that we have at the university level is we have only few companies who are willing to take students for internship. Now, where do we expect the skill to come from? From classrooms? No way. So this is a challenge that we have. Companies are not willing to take the students for internship. Then after they graduate, companies also complain that the students are not competent enough. So we have to work hand in hand. If more companies are willing to take the students for internship, like for 2 months, for 3 or 4 month internship, then they'll know the working environment. They can easily chip into any of the services that they have. So the skill has to come from the industries, and the learning should come from the universities. So we have to collaborate on that part. The other one, knowing where our students are, we just have the report on where our graduates are from last year, 2009, Ethiopian calendar. We are also compiling the graduate profile for this year. So we have a tracer study going on at a national level to know where our graduates are. This is going to be very important even to revise our curriculum. Some of the fields that we think are very demanded by the industry, are actually having a very less employment rate. We have seen that. Different fields having, which are demanded, by new university entrants, but the employment rate is very low. So this will also help us to modify or to enhance our curriculum with that perspective. But we have tracer study at the university.
I'll try to make it short. Empowering the youth, either for employment or entrepreneurship, requires collaboration among different stakeholders. The first one is government. The government has to furnish, for example, free access of internet, or having a campaign, for example, digital literacy or computer literacy, where most of the problems lies. And the business sector or the industries, they have to cooperate and work with different educational institutions. Unless they work together, as Dr. Wonderson said, the educational institutions cannot provide the required skill to their business. And third, the youth themselves, they have to be competent enough, they have to be committed, and they have to work together according to the current technology. And also, the diaspora, they are the one who can bring knowledge transfer to the country. We are responsible to share what we have or what we get from other countries. And other stakeholders like non-profit organizations, they are also responsible to cooperate and to work together for the success of this empowerment of the youth.
Yeah, so I'll also be brief. I'll direct most of my comments toward the gentleman from Save the Children with the green sweater. Olaf, was their name Olaf? Yes. So yeah, I mean, I guess in that speech, what I heard was a lot of frustration. I guess maybe is that an accurate characterization? I mean, I'll try to address some things related to my own thoughts on that. One comment was on infrastructure, like network connectivity. Even I myself, as I was preparing for this panel last night, I didn't have internet in my in-laws' home. Hello, testing. Okay. I mean, I think that's very important. I wasn't here in 1994. I can't speak to how things were then. But I mean, I have witnessed. I'm a layperson in this regard. I have witnessed progress even since I've started coming to Ethiopia. I remember in 2009, I was touring around with my cousin who lives in Addis. We saw Aksum and Lalibela, etc. And pretty much as soon as we left Addis, we didn't have internet. And now when I go outside Addis to these same places, the internet on my phone is even faster than in Addis because it's not congested. So, I mean, I do think, yes, there's more to be done, but I mean, I'm confident or I'm hopeful that there will be progress in regard to infrastructure. I also think maybe we're not the right people to address infrastructure issues. That's not our expertise. Regarding many of us talking about like teaching the top students as opposed to the, Ethiopia has over 100 million people. If I tell you I'm teaching the top 200, 300 students in the country in the summer program, how does that affect the millions? I mean, we definitely do recognize that, and I think that's part of the reason, at least for our program, why we wanted to have this outreach to these local university students, these 40 plus I mentioned, so that they would go out and evangelize the message to even more, right? Because I'm only one person, and our teaching staff is small. I think that it is important not just to inspire these students, but to inspire other people to have even more programs. I can tell you that, the reason that I think this program even exists is because I heard of someone else named Solomon Asafa. He's the founding director of IBM Research Africa. He was, okay, wrap up. Okay, so anyway, we got to wrap up. But long story short, there was another program that existed, before that I knew from a university mate. And, just the fact, I didn't even know him that well, just the fact that his program existed inspired us to create this program and inspired, some of our alums from our program have created their own programs. And the hope is that these things spread, right? So, and that you have impact to more than just the students attending one program. But, okay.
Okay, thank you. One or two just last reflections from myself, and then we're going to be wrapping up. Soft skills, I heard a lot about soft skills. So yeah, the Young Professionals Development Program, I actually created that in 2007. And then we rolled it out for the Investment Commission last year. Yes, there's a massive redundancy of soft skills, of students coming out of universities and colleges. And it's also quite unfortunate to have to be teaching them at the end of their studies what these soft skills are, because those are things that should be coming through high schools and universities. But also, it's not, some of it is skill and some of it is just work culture. Responding to an email in a timely manner is not a skill. It's a culture. And to Mahder's point, companies are a huge part of the problem as well. It's not just the academic institutions. It's about creating a work culture. So you can complain that people don't have soft skills, but do you and your organization set that culture in the right way and set the expectations in the right way? Very briefly, I'm just going to talk about this comment about entrepreneurship versus employment. So the next panel, which we're going to be moving to now, is about entrepreneurship. However, when we talk about creating jobs for 1.3 million people every year, self-employment is something that we spend a lot of time talking about in Ethiopia. It's not something that I ever heard a lot about in the UK or in Europe or in the US. Self-employment is a reflection of a country's weakness, of a lack of capacity, of companies to create jobs for young people. There's one or two Mark Zuckerbergs out there who create big companies and become successful entrepreneurs. But for every one or two of them, there are 100,000, maybe 1 million graduates, who are getting employed in organizations, and we need those businesses. And typically in a society, that mass employment starts with manufacturing and moves towards services. But we do need entrepreneurs because we don't have companies either. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you to the panel, thank you to the audience. This has been an interesting discussion. We can take the discussion outside of the room. If you want to talk more about the Young Professionals Program and the soft skills, I'm happy to talk about that. Olaf, very happy to learn more about your experience in Ethiopia and Yabelo. Thank you to the panel. I think everyone's around this morning.